So it looks like we have some folks that are joining us. We're going to give about 1 minute and then we'll go ahead and jump right in.
Yes, we have a packed agenda, so we want to get to it, don't we? So you've had a busy day so far, right, Fred?
Always a busy day, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, especially since we've been working from home for like the last year and a half, that everybody just piles everything on your agenda because it's the thing to do because you have nowhere else to go. And so I
Yes.
forget to do normal stuff like, oh, I
Yeah.
didn't do this, I didn't do that. And it's because you're just sitting in one room the whole day,
Right.
dressed from the waist up. So
I know. Well, I've sort of come to expect that efficiency of just kind of going from Zoom meeting to Zoom
oh yeah,
meeting.
yeah.
And I've forgotten that it takes, when I have to go somewhere in person, that it takes time to get
Oh
in the
yeah.
car. And
I'm having lunch with somebody tomorrow, and so I have to plan ahead because I don't know how it's all going to work. First time doing that in a while.
yes, give yourself extra time.
So it looks like we have some folks that are joined. So let's jump right in, Melissa. So
Yeah.
welcome everybody that's joined us so far. My name is Fred Riley, and I serve as the executive director of Weave, the Social Fabric Project at the Aspen Institute. We connect, support, and invest in hyperlocal leaders who are working to build trust and relationships in their communities. I'm honored to be joined today by Melissa Carter, Senior Manager of the Inclusive Communities Grant Portfolio at Walmart.org, also known as the Walmart Foundation, where she is focused on helping to build bridges across lines of difference. Melissa is new to Walmart, about a month into the job. And so before we get started, a large focus of our work is all about relationships. And so maybe it might be a good time for me to get to know Melissa a little better before we jump into the agenda. So, Melissa, I love this question, and I like to start a lot of our meetings with this question. Tell me something that brought you joy this week.
Well, that's a fun question to get started with.
It's Wednesday, so it should be something so far.
Yes, yes. Well, I would say that, so I live in Arkansas, here in the South, where typically it doesn't start to feel like fall until much later than probably any of our colleagues in the Northeast. And so it's finally started to cool off just a little bit, and I am really enjoying the much cooler weather. So that's what's bringing me joy, that it feels like fall. It's not quite so hot and humid, and we can go outside and just enjoy being outside a little bit more.
I can't say the same for the district, right? So I don't feel like
Still warm.
it's still warm here.
Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit about your new role, Melissa.
Yeah, so I lead our philanthropy and grant making for the Belonging and Inclusive Communities portfolio within the Opportunity team at Walmart.org. And again, Walmart.org is the Walmart Foundation. And this portfolio is really looking at building bridges across lines of difference, and it complements the work of my colleagues within the Center for Racial Equity. So we have a lot going on at Walmart that is related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm really excited about this role that I get to play specifically around belonging and building bridges.
Wow. Melissa, tell me about somebody you trust and why.
That's a great question. Especially to kick off this conversation. So, the first person that comes to mind is my husband. I've been married for 11 years, and after 3 kids and a few international moves, he has proven himself to be very trustworthy. I
hope so, Melissa.
A great trustworthy friend and partner. But also I would say, I'm really happy to say that I feel like I can really trust my new team. I've only been in this role for, like I said, a month, but they have just been phenomenally supportive. And I think it's so exciting to see that, even after just the short period of time, I think we have this great kind of working relationship and camaraderie, and they've jumped in and just rallied around me and my transition and really want to see this work be successful. And the way they're just giving so much of their own time to help make sure that I'm onboarded and that this work continues, sacrificing kind of their own time to help me has been fantastic to see. So great team, great work. I really couldn't ask for more.
Wow. Melissa, so I'm extra excited to be in conversation with you today because there's a lot of overlap between Weave's mission and the work you're leading at Walmart. We are aligned on the significance of investing in local communities. Today, we'll spend some time discussing a critical component of any functional community or relationship, and that's trust, our nation's social trust. Social trust is the belief in honesty, integrity, and dependability of others, of faith in people. It's a simple concept to describe, but it's never been easy to figure out who trusts who or why. In the early 1970s, one half of Americans said that most people can be trusted. Today, that figure is less than one third. In 2018, a Pew poll said that 29% of Americans over the age of 65 said most people cannot be trusted, while 60% of Americans aged 18 to 29 agreed with that. That is a lot to take in, Melissa. What comes to mind for you when you hear this data on social trust?
It's discouraging, but not really that surprising. I imagine that all of us are really feeling that sense, that lack of that social trust, whether or not we would even think to articulate it in the way that you described it. And you mentioned that was in 2018. So I would say that that distrust maybe has increased in years since then, because we know that proximity and relationships help increase trust. And with the pandemic over the last couple of years, leading to more of that isolation and more of those digital interactions as opposed to more in-person interactions, that potentially that distrust and some of that isolation has increased. And so for me, I think it really demonstrates the relevancy of this conversation and why I am so grateful to be working in this space, and why I'm so grateful that Walmart has been and is continuing to dedicate resources to helping our communities become places where people feel included and connected to one another.
Wow. Melissa, I think when a lot of people think about trust, they only think about interpersonal relationships with each other, significant others, family, or friends. But social trust, when we lack social trust, people are less likely to comply with laws and regulations, contribute to the economy, resist the appeals of manipulators, or support our neighbors. This trust contributes to a very wide range of things, including the financial growth of our economy, our stock market, our democracy, social integration, peace, harmony, life, happiness, innovation, and even things as grim as suicide. Those are hard to swallow, right? But we're solutions based, right? So there are a few things we can do as a nation to increase social trust. Let's highlight a couple of them. They're increased transparency, build better leaders, and support local leaders. Melissa, I'd like to unpack these actions together. Transparency is deeply rooted in vulnerability, which has traditionally been left out of the boardroom. What are some of the practical ways leaders at any organization can increase transparency?
That's a great question. At Walmart, I think trust is something that we talk about a lot. People are placing more trust in businesses than they ever have before. And we really see that trust can be a competitive advantage. That conversation about how to build trust and maintain a culture of integrity and transparency is really relevant and something that we're focused on a lot. And so I would say that modeling is really important. It has to be modeled consistently in those day-to-day actions. Not just externally, not just talking about it and kind of talking the talk, but really walking the walk. And so modeling that internally. And I think that requires, like you mentioned, that vulnerability. Leaders are going to have to step into that space bravely and do that vulnerably and demonstrate that when individuals are are vulnerable and transparent, that it will be rewarded, and that there will be consistency, that leaders will listen well, and that they will be very open with information, and just do that modeling work that I mentioned. And, the other thing that I think is so important, and what I'm really seeing with a lot of the leaders, a lot of the bridge builders in this space that I've gotten a chance to work with so far, is this idea of including everyone. You and so many others, some of our other partners and grantees, are being really vulnerable to challenge your own assumptions and staying curious and involving a wide range of stakeholders and inviting their feedback and being willing to have, again, your assumptions challenged, and you're welcoming that feedback, and you are empowering those around you to kind of speak truth to power, in a sense, and say, I'm not sure if this is the right course of action, or should we pivot here? What should we do? And that kind of vulnerability, that openness, that inviting others in, I think is so important for transparency.
Wow. So I hear modeling, consistency, and including everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I think we think one of the simplest ways to increase transparency is including everyone. We almost sometimes see ourselves as bread makers, and where we should invite everyone in to help knead the dough together if we're going to ultimately feast on this bread. And so in the coming months, we're going to launch applications for an inaugural advisory board. And this group is going to help us bake the bread. And there'll be people from around the country who are working locally to help guide our strategy moving forward, because we believe as transparency that we have to include everyone. This next action I mentioned was building better leaders. And so I guess we'd have to start with defining what better means.
Mm-hmm.
In the context of the rampant distrust, what does it mean to build better leaders? Is this currently a focus of your work at Walmart?
Yeah. So when I think about communities that are inclusive and thriving, where those bridges have been built across lines of difference, there's no doubt that a community that is modeling that inclusivity has benefited from some form of just really top-notch leadership. And so what I think that would look like, those leaders who would be able to affect really meaningful change are going to have a few things in common. And I love alliteration. So I think those three things would be passion, proximity, and patience. Passion for community and the ideals of inclusion and belonging. Proximity to those communities is you can't replace that. We know that trying to direct a community that you don't have a connection to is not going to be sustainable and have that long-term change. And then patience to understand that building trust like this is going to take some time. And so I think that's exactly what you all are modeling with Weave, and why we at Walmart are so proud to be partnering with you in that, because the Weavers are so deeply embedded and engaged within their communities and doing that work on that daily basis. And, at Walmart, we have 2.2 million associates around the world, and 90% of Americans live within 10 miles of a Walmart. And so, I think we really understand that we have a significant role to play when it comes to supporting healthy, inclusive communities, because we have that proximity, and we want to, use that and steward that well to really support those healthy, inclusive communities.
Wow. Well, listen, I couldn't have answered that better myself, because, we believe that to truly build better leaders, that we must reframe who we identify as a leader. And so it is what you said about the proximity. Truly, everyone holds the responsibility of leadership in their life and their community, and most don't realize it. And so we've received outreach from tons of folks around the country who want to show up for their community, and folks who are. So we created an online community, a safe space where established weavers and folks who are aspiring to weave in their communities can come together to exchange ideas and resources so that they can deepen their work. And so we believe it's almost like iron sharpening iron, with local leaders building and working together in community. This last and final action is most likely dear to our hearts, and it's supporting local leaders. What are you doing to support local leaders at Walmart?
Yeah. So, um, two ways, right? So within the business and then through our philanthropic efforts. So, at Walmart, we have over 11,000 stores worldwide. And that culture of service and leadership in each of those communities where our stores reside is something that we really want and are trying to foster. So in the US in particular, we are trying to engage our associates as leaders to get to know and support other leaders in their communities where they live and work. Leaders like nonprofit leaders and other organizations. So we have several programs like volunteerism always pays. We do some donation matching programs, and then investing in our associates' development. So things like new roles and career paths, cross training, our Live Better You education program, so that any of our associates, can always be investing in themselves and in their leadership capabilities. And at every step of the way, we just want to kind of going back to that modeling piece, modeling that belief, truly that we are stronger and more resilient when everyone, all of our associates, our customers, our community members are included and heard and empowered. So we want to be that transformative force for equity and inclusion within how we do business. And then in addition to that, on the philanthropic side, which is what we are particularly looking at within our foundation, within my portfolio, we are looking at supporting organizations like Weave at the Social Fabric Project, others like Welcoming America, the Center for Inclusion and Belonging, all of those that have that focus to be empowering those local leaders that have that passion and that proximity to be creating a society where trust and belonging are increasing, and we can be kind of taking back some of that distrust that you talked about, at the very beginning.
Melissa, we recently doubled down on how we support local leaders. In all our work, we're asking ourselves, how can we best leverage our resources to support folks who are working locally, building trust and strengthening communities? How do we share financial and social capital with them? How do we utilize our strategy to amplify their work? And how do we develop tools and resources that give them more space to focus on their community? Mm-hmm. This year in Baltimore, we piloted a project called Weaver Awards that we hope to take nationally. Weaver Awards provide small grants to individuals and small groups who are building trust in their communities without the strings attached, like consuming reporting and things like that. Mm-hmm. What we heard from the local leaders is we'd like to apply for grants, but we don't qualify, we don't have the time. And so we decided to create this smaller, more simpler process to aid them in the process so that they can take the funds and deepen their impact in their communities.
It's fantastic.
Melissa and I have talked about Weave and Walmart, what we're learning and what we're doing as it relates to trust. But trust is a team sport, and we need each of you along the journey with us. Our nation right now is in a bad relationship that some might say is beyond repair. And when relationships feel beyond repair, most people just give up, break up, or divorce. But it's not that easy with our nation's social trust. The strength and vitality of our nation really depends on it. We can't afford to just sit in the idea that we are a lost cause. So if each of you would take a moment and imagine our nation like a relationship in crisis. We and those we distrust the most, whether it's individuals or institutions. We're heading off to see a marriage counselor or a wise counsel on our relationship. What might some of that sage advice be? Right now, if you're in the chat, go ahead and enter some of the advice that you might hear from a marriage counselor or some wise counsel or a couple who's been married for years that can help us navigate this idea of trust. And I can imagine hearing from them, be willing and committed to the process of building trust. Remember that people can be trusted. Be willing to be vulnerable and uncomfortable. Renew your focus on the future together, and remember that this takes a little time to build trust. I don't know if I see anybody putting anything in the chat, and I just assume that you all are probably having lunch or something at the same time. But Melissa, what's one piece of advice you'd like to leave with the folks who are listening in today for rebuilding trust, and anything else you're burning to leave behind with the group that's assembled with us?
Yeah. So yesterday I actually had a really meaningful conversation with a colleague of mine, Tony Waller. He's a vice president of constituent relations and racial equity at Walmart. And he said something to me, and I went back and got his permission to share this because I thought it was so profound. All right. Well, I think we made it mostly.
I think we made it.
All right.
I think we might still have some folks who are here listening to us.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what happened with that. That was like the weirdest thing. Like really frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a little bit. I just lost connection there, but glad that we got the chance to make it most of the way through the conversation.
Ingrid, so still some folks here, right? And Ingrid says it's okay. It was getting good. So how about you go ahead with yeah, they're still here. So go ahead.
Awesome.
One last, so the last question to you.
Hey, Maggie, thanks for joining. Yeah, there was some really great some ideas there in the chat about how to increase trust that I thought were fantastic. Yes. So appreciate everybody sharing all of that. What did you see in there, Fred, that you thought was really helpful?
I saw a couple of them. The vulnerability and the transparency with the vulnerability is probably the most part for me. And then Nancy included active listening, which is something I'm never really good at.
I know. Listening to listen and understand, not to just respond.
I'm always listening to pounce on the other person afterwards.
I don't get that from you, Fred, so I think you have to give yourself more credit. So, yeah, really appreciate everybody's just engagement today. And gosh, I wish that we could have much more time to get to know everybody in the room and find out what everyone's doing. This summit has been fantastic. I've learned so much already. Any key takeaways from you so far, Fred?
So I think as we round down our time, I think, I don't know. I think we should no key takeaways to me, but I do want to take a moment just to publicly thank you. I know you're just a month into your new role, and this is like trial by like fire. So thank you so much for like jumping in and being on this with me today. And I really do appreciate it because I feel like we all have to be a part of this together if our nation's trust will increase. So thank you for that. I'll leave you all with a quote from former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt in the voice of the American broadcast in 1951. She went on to say, "It isn't enough to talk about peace, one must live in it. And it isn't enough to believe in it, one must work at it." And our nation's trust is the same. It isn't enough to talk about it. We all must believe in it, but it isn't enough to just believe in it. We must all work at our nation's trust. I hope today's time together sparked, no pun intended, something in you to think a little bit more about trust and the work we must all do to build it.